Sometimes I think I came to photography by accident, not by intention. I mean, I didn't grow up thinking I want to be a photographer. But clearly photography was something kind of magical for me. It gave me this way of being in the world that allowed me to just wander, discover, try to decipher. So it became my language. It's become my language.
Hi, welcome back. Susan Meiselas made a name for herself in the 70s when she covered Nicaragua's Sandinista revolution. The day before the dictator president, Dibele, fled Nicaragua, she captured her now famous Molotov Man photograph. It became an iconic image of the revolution, and in 2016, Time magazine included it in their choice of the 100 most influential photographs of all time. The image took on a life of its own. It started being used throughout Nicaragua on matchboxes, t-shirts, and it was frequently painted on walls in public spaces. Over the next 4 years, Meiselas became enmeshed in the constantly changing events within the country. When she first arrived, she was the only female photographer covering the conflict. She had to learn on the job and respond as best as she could to this ever-evolving situation. She relied on her intuition in order to anticipate the next dramatic event.
In the early 80s, there's a civil war in Nicaragua. I met a writer who said it's really interesting what's happening there. The Somoza family had been in power for 50 years, a rebel force developing very much out of the young, of the wealthy. And it was relatively unknown. There were very few stories coming out. There were no visuals. Nobody knew what it looked like. Every day seemed different. Every week things were evolving. I was completely immersed in that progression, the kind of thing that people mostly watch from television and wonder what will happen next. It's very compelling to be part of history evolving. It kind of grabs you. So there's an ongoing engagement with history and what it means to make photographs of a particular moment in time that's kind of timely and timeless. Of course, to be as much of an outsider as I was when I first went to Nicaragua and then progressively to other parts of Latin America. And when you're a stranger in a place which is in conflict, no one's there to protect you unless you have relationships. So it's very essential for people to understand why you're there.
She said that what taught her the most was just working, being in the field and confronting questions and problems and trying to solve them. While she always does detailed research before heading to a new destination or embarking on a story, she's found that the real work begins when you're on the ground. She's never been interested in style per se. She doesn't care that viewers don't immediately identify a picture as being hers. Born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1948, she started teaching elementary school in the South Bronx. She got a taste for adventure and the exploration of foreign cultures when she was 19. She traveled to Japan, India, Turkey, and Yugoslavia and stayed for extended periods with families in those countries. One of her first projects was called Prince Street Girls. It focused on the relationship between young girls in her own neighborhood in downtown Manhattan. The project extended over 17 years, and she followed the lives of these girls as they transitioned from childhood to puberty and then on to adulthood. The photographs illustrate the gradual changes in their lives, their bodies, and their place within society.
So one of the photographs amongst the 9 that I have is this one of Carol, Jojo, and Lisa, taken literally just in front of my home in Little Italy, where I still live. And I was teaching, but in the afternoons or on the weekends, I would come back and I would cross the paths of these girls. So it felt very comfortable to be in my neighborhood. These girls were all in the Catholic school, again, within a block of my neighborhood. And they were told by their parents that they had to stay on the corner. This is the corner, if you're in New York, of Prince and Mott Street. So they became the Prince Street girls. And that's what I loved, watching them become women, essentially.
Meiselas' approach has always begun with finding something that she's curious about. She admits that she doesn't always know how to begin a project. Rather, the process evolves as she becomes familiar with a subject. Initially, she didn't really see herself as a photographer, but the project The Carnival Strippers changed all that. She recognized that she had shifted her connection and involvement with her subjects. This essay became a centering point within her life, and she's been probing and questioning her role as a photographer ever since.
I don't go into the field as an advocate. I go into the field to make a discovery. I don't start with the mission. I start with what is going on, the question, what is going on? What can I see? What can I show and convey through the photographs? It's the challenge to move people and connect people and find ways that people can be engaged meaningfully.
She spent 3 summers photographing the women who performed striptease at carnivals in New England, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. She combined her photographs with audio recordings so that the women could tell their own stories. Her pictures are raw but compassionately reveal the reality of the lives of these women, who by and large were simply farm girls trying to make a living in this seedy environment. So really, this picture is the beginning of kind of the recognition that there was, maybe this is the beginning of my life as a photographer. And that happens because I see this woman on the stage, really what felt like an auction block. And if you were to hear the talker here, he would be saying, "No ladies and no babies." So no ladies and no babies as a woman just meant that I had to figure out a way to get in to the show. What was going on inside that women were forbidden to enter? Why is it so important to return or stay with or over time see the evolution? In this case, coming back meant I was granted kind of access I didn't have the first summer. So the second summer, I'm able to enter the dressing room, meet some of the women one-to-one. So I'm going to share a very short clip of Lena, who I came to know.
The girls just seemed like they were just objects, and they weren't whole, like half a piece of pie. I think as far as being a stripper, it's as close to being in a man's world as you can be.
The work was initially published in 1976, and in the same year she was invited to join Magnum Photos. At the time, she didn't really have a sense of the agency and its history, or what it would actually mean for her to join. For her, the camera was just a means of going out and discovering the world. 4 years later, she became a full member, and currently she's the president of the Magnum Foundation. Meiselas self-funded her next significant project, the developing revolution in Nicaragua. As I mentioned earlier, she spent 4 years covering the Sandinista revolt. Then, just a little further north, El Salvador was heating up, and Meiselas moved on to cover the brutal civil war that erupted after a coup d'etat challenged the military dictatorship. The world's focus turned to this tiny country after the assassination of human rights advocate Archbishop Romero, as well as the murder of 4 US churchwomen. Meiselas was present when the bodies of the women were found and exhumed.
In El Salvador, it was difficult to look head on. It was difficult to face the brutality. It was much tougher than anything I'd seen in Nicaragua. This photograph is made in the early 80s. That particular moment is when a bus is stopped on a major highway and the National Guard pull people off the bus and start to interrogate them. And they're looking for evidence of their alliance or their sympathies with the guerrilla movement. You don't know what's going to happen to these people. Everything in time is held still for a moment. You hold your breath not knowing what they might think, what they might find, what they might do.
Over time, her interests have remained focused on the plight of women, as well as on persecuted communities. In 1991, she began a long-term project in Kurdistan. She documented the genocide of the Kurds in Saddam Hussein's northern Iraq, and then went on to collate an archive that preserves the Kurds' cultural memory and their volatile history. As with her Carnival Strippers project, here she combines various forms of media to produce a complex portrait of these people. Meiselas quotes John Sikowski saying there are 2 kinds of photographic engagement: self-expression and exploration. The former, self-expression, acts as a mirror, while the other, exploration, is a window. She sees that many image makers today focus on themselves, their family, or their culture. And although this might be a great place for a photographer to begin, she says that she would hate to think that the limit of our curiosity remains with just ourselves. She continues to be a committed explorer. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time.
The ethics of seeing are the ethics of caring. It's not a compositional issue only to see. It's to feel. It's to connect. It's to engage in some way. What is a photograph? It's this juncture point, between the photographer, the subject, the spectator, the people that see it from different angles. So there's this sense that you have to witness. It's the least you can do is document. What's the purpose of this act of a photograph? This photograph is for whom? And so for a long time, that's been the question motivating almost everything that I do. So this photograph, I'm both present and absent. I have very few self-portraits, and I know the whole culture is interested in selfies, and I don't love them. And people, I think, might want to be photographed with me, and I just, somehow that always feels wrong. It's always me looking out. I don't like being looked at. And so when I look at this photograph, which I made in 1971, part of what's so strange is that it's really symbolic of my whole working practice for 5 decades since.